name is Lisa Doyle. Welcome to our retirement relocation webinar. We are all super excited that everyone's here to join us. We want to navigate all of your questions when it comes to, either making plans for a major move, or plans for a retirement move out of California. So we want to introduce you to all of our speakers for today. My name again is Lisa Doyle. I'm a longtime real estate agent here in Danville with Sereno.
And I'm Martin.Johnson. I'm a wealth manager and financial planner here in the East Bay.
My name is Christopher.DiPasqua. I'm a CPA, and I've been helping individuals and business owners with their tax compliance and tax consulting needs.
My name is Vicente. I'm with the Mutual of Omaha, and I work with HECM and jumbos for purchase.
Hi, I'm Daryl Nelson. I'm a mortgage consultant with Diversified Capital Funding in Danville, California.
Awesome. Well, all of us, we know that our clients are all working on plans to either prepare to move out of California and retire or downsize, or, just all of us in our respective industries. We've got clients with questions about that. And so we want to walk you guys through the how-tos of it all, introduce you to some answers to maybe some of your questions. We want to arm you to be prepared to make that move smooth with, of course, as much money in your pocket and your retirement accounts as possible when it's all said and done. So I know for me personally, being a real estate agent, the three questions that I get most from clients are, number one, if I need to retire, I want to retire and downsize, where do I go? Like, what cities are the best across the country to consider? Number two is people want to know what their houses are worth. We have had just an enormous jump in property values here in California, Northern California, especially in the last few years. And the last thing people want to know is, how do we prepare the house so that they can maximize the return without spending very much? How do you get the biggest return on your possible fix-ups? So as you guys are navigating your plans, I'm happy to help you with any of your questions. The second and third question, anytime you guys need anything in addition to that. But the one for me personally, I'm going to focus on is the question I get most is, if I want to retire and leave California or consider other cities across the country, where in the world do I go? So I'm going to share with you some of the most popular cities that I've seen clients look at or consider. And then I'm going to go deep on one of them. But of course, any of the cities that you might all have questions about, I can help you with the same type of information that we're going to talk about today. So we'll go to our first slide. So these are the most popular cities that I've experienced clients asking about and moving to. So Minden, Nevada, which is just outside of Reno by Gardnerville, Minden. It's kind of in between Carson City and Reno. Eagle, Idaho has been a super popular one in the last year. Vancouver, Washington, and all parts of Washington, really. Phoenix, Arizona has been a lot of people questions about that. Dallas, Texas, and anywhere Dallas. I have 3 clients right now moving to Texas, different parts. Nashville, Tennessee has been a popular one. And then Florida, Naples as one city, but anywhere in Florida, people are asking about. So what I'm going to do is, I've had the most questions about the Tennessee area, anywhere Tennessee, but Nashville in particular. So let's go through some of the details about that area. I want to answer some of your questions about, what does the greater Nashville have to offer? And what I want you all to know is, any city that you're considering, I can bring you this kind of information. So what we know about the Nashville area is medium home prices around $600,000. And what I'm looking at is the surrounding, like 30 minutes outside of the main city. So there's a little town called Lebanon, Mount Juliet, Franklin, Clarksville, and Murfreesboro. I always have a hard time with that one. But they're all about 15 to 30 minutes outside of Nashville. So it gives people some choices. And one thing that I have had clients share is, they are looking at the potential of, states that do not have an additional state income tax. But what I want to share with you is some of these pictures here. Nashville has a lot to offer. Let's go back on that last slide real quick, Francesca. So the Nashville airport's right there, large in and out. You can go anywhere across the country. Vanderbilt University is a big one. People have loved. There's hospitals. There's a lot to do. So we'll switch to the next slide. A lot to do in Nashville, especially if you're a music lover. There's so much to do with history, the Ryman, the Grand Ole Opry. There's rivers, lakes, a lot of camping. I think a lot of our Danville greater families are golfers. So there's several golf courses right there in around the Nashville area. There's museums, trails. There's a river that runs right through. There's just a lot to offer. And Nashville, for those that love music, one of the things that I love about Nashville, my son happens to live right there, is music from 6 a.m. Every diner, every coffee shop, every restaurant, until all night long. There's live music everywhere. And one of the things that's super fun too, history about Nashville, is a lot of the big artists that for the last 50 years that are in the country world. They all own restaurants there and they show up, they participate with their customers. It's really fun. So go to the next slide, Miss Francesca. So a couple things that we get a lot, people ask about everywhere across the country is, what about retirement communities? So in the Nashville greater area, there are 3 that are super popular. There's a few others, but these were the most popular that people have enjoyed. So there's a Del Webb right there in that Mount Juliet area. There's one in Franklin, which again is about 20 minutes outside of Nashville. And the cottages at that Murfreesboro, there I did it right, area. And so prices in those areas, and these are fairly new communities. So people that are moving from here to other places, they tend to like the newer communities. So let's switch to the next slide, Francesca. And so here's just photographs of some of these properties. And you can see they're newer communities, single story, all of them. And they're all on pretty sizable land and lots, although you can get some that are a little bit lower maintenance. But that Del Webb area, 300,000 to 600,000, ranging from about 2,000 square feet on up. And then that area, that Reed Hill Commons, in that 400 or so. And then the cottages, 200,000 to 300,000 for a retirement home. There's just so much advantage that we have to some of the states across the country. And what I did learn about the outskirts of Tennessee is that the real estate taxes are less than 1% as well, something to keep in mind. And so now that you guys have an idea of a little bit about some of the cities to consider, I know Martin's going to help you through some, strategies on how to take your money and take as much money as you can with you when you go. So take it away, Martin.
Well, thanks very much, Lisa. That was a great overview of some really wonderful places to consider for retirement.
Thank you.
I wouldn't mind living in one of those nice houses myself.
Exactly. That's what I was thinking. And I do have realtor friends all over the country as well. So if any of you have questions about any city, just let me know. I'm happy to get you data and introduce you to someone who can help you.
Well, thank you so much, Lisa.
Welcome.
Well, again, I'm Martin.Johnson. I'm a financial planner and wealth manager, and I'm here to talk about how we can run the numbers as you consider making a move like this. So when my clients look at this important decision to make this kind of move out of California, they really represent 2 types of people with 2 things that tend to drive the decision. The first type are people that are making a strategic move, mainly for just the tax reason. And the idea here is that they're going to make a change in their tax residence prior to triggering a tax event, like say they have a large 401k and they want to make the move before they start taking distributions. Or it could be before starting their pension from work, or exercising of stock option grants they've been sitting on for a long time, or perhaps the sale of the sale of business or a commercial piece of real estate, or actually any other anticipated spike in their earned income. So if you're considering making a strategic move like that before triggering one of those events, my advice is to be really careful and listen to the next speaker, Chris, who's going to talk about the details in regard to that, because the state of California really does not like missing out on you paying them your taxes. So tread very carefully when you're doing this. But more often, when we talk to clients, it really comes down to more of a realistic move as opposed to a strategic one. So moving out of California might be really the only way to make the economics work, to make the numbers work for your retirement. It could be the only way that you're going to be able to retire in the comfort level you want is to leave California. You might need to lower your ongoing cost of living, especially your taxes. Could be a big part of the cash flow expense. It could be the only way to find the needed additional resources by downsizing or reducing your housing costs and get that chunk of money and actually use that cash to fund the retirement cash flow needs. And Daryl and Rick are going to talk a little bit more about that. It actually could be more of an emotional thing. You just want less stress in life. You want less traffic, less crowd. The costs are too high. It's time to make a change. You want less worry in life. Look at all the smoke and air pollution, the homelessness, the drought we're dealing with. So maybe it's time to make a move for a lot of people. So a typical plan would involve releasing the equity locked in your home by making the move and using the income generated from that lump sum to fill in the missing pieces of the retirement cash flow. Next to Social Security, your pension income, 401k and IRA distributions, you might need to find the money to backfill that income gap in your plan. Next slide, please. To do that, we need to answer some important questions. Now, how much income can you take on a sustainable basis? What's the best way for you and your spouse to claim Social Security benefits, the timing of that? What about your expenses? Can we manage those? What's the likelihood of my money lasting as long as I do in retirement? The powerful software that we use to build our plans can show all the moving parts, especially calculating the probability of running out of money in retirement, and show you what we can do to make a plan so that your income will last and is going to be sustainable. Next slide. You know, when we were young, the joke was, boy, you know, it's too much month at the end of the money, you know, after the paycheck's gone. But in retirement, you do not want too many years in retirement at the end of your money. That's why we want to put a plan in place to avoid that. Next slide. Our planning process develops a cash flow plan year by year to show where you are now and how to get to the right position to meet your retirement goals. So after all this, feel free to reach out to any of us with follow-up questions. Happy to start a discussion about how to put a real plan in place for the next phase of life. But now I'd like to hand it over to our CPA in residence, Christopher.DiPasqua, who will talk about some of the important tax implications and the things you need to carefully think about as you're considering making this move. Chris?
Well, thank you, Martin. And that was a great financial summary. And my name is Christopher.DiPasqua, as Martin just said. And today I'm going to be covering, primarily focusing on income taxes, because that's my area of expertise. But I do want to touch a minute on other taxes to consider in your decision process of whether or not to leave California, as this really shouldn't be only an income tax driven decision. You know, the topic itself, though, is very in-depth, it's very complex, and there's no way I can cover everything in this short amount of time. So, you know, what works best for you is going to depend on your particular facts and circumstances, and there's really no one shoe that fits all solution here. And so hopefully, though, today what I cover will give you some basic information that you can use to start a conversation with professionals, such as those on our panel today, to see how they can apply to your particular situation. And I got to say this, sorry, but please note the information I provide here today cannot be relied upon as tax advice. So the key here, though, is to seek the advice of a professional before you make any decisions, especially one as life-altering and disruptive as moving to another state. All right, so let's get on with it. Now, taxes are one of the true constants in life, and it's one of the reasons I chose it as a profession. You know, there's income taxes, there's property taxes, there's sales and use taxes, there's excise taxes, there's estate taxes. And some states are even proposing a wealth tax to try and help balance budgets, and California is among them. The key here, though, is every state is different, has its own particular set of state and local taxes. And as you well know, California is a high income tax state, you know, no shocker there. Next slide, please. And now, as you'll see here, the states in purple are states that actually have no income tax, as Lisa was pointing out. And so, you know, Washington, Nevada, Texas, you know, among them. And so, you know, it's one of those things, though, that states with no income tax generally have a higher property tax and sales tax burden. So if, for example, if you have low income and therefore relatively low income tax, the no income tax states could end up actually being a higher tax overall tax burden for you on things like sales tax and property taxes. That's just something you want to keep in mind. Next slide, please. Now, this slide, what it's trying to show is to that point, if you look at the states that are marked in green, I'll pick on Washington for a second. You know, it is a no income tax state. However, on the poorest 20%, the average tax rate for state and local taxes, which is income tax, which it doesn't have, property tax, sales tax, and whatnot, is around 18% on the poorest 20%. Whereas the top 1%, it's more like 3%. And I don't want to get into a discussion on income disparities and all of that, but again, I just wanted to point that out to you to make sure as an overall plan that you're aware, because you really need to take a big picture approach when you're trying to make this decision of whether or not to leave California. Another thing is just to keep in mind is simply leaving California doesn't necessarily mean you're going to avoid California taxes. So next slide, please. Now, you know, why is that? You know, well, the reason is you need to make a clean break from California. You got to cut all ties for tax purposes. Because California, you know, as Martin had mentioned, you know, California likes to think that all income is California sourced, and therefore it's taxable to California. So why should this even matter? And what's the worst that could happen? Well, if you don't make a clean break, and particularly if you don't seek the advice of a professional, you could find yourself in a situation where your income is actually double taxed at the state level. And that's a worst case, worst of the worst case scenario, but it could actually happen if you don't do this properly. So therefore, to truly cut ties with California for tax purposes, it requires some very deliberate steps on your part and forethought and planning that needs to happen. Again, you want to seek the advice of a professional before you take any actions. Now, what are some of the major considerations for determining residency and, for that matter, California sourced income? There are many factors, and I can't get into them all today because that's a whole discussion in and of itself, but I just wanted to touch on some key ones. One of the main ones is how many days did you spend inside and outside of California? In general, if you spend at least 183 days in one state, doesn't have to be consecutive, that generally determines your state of residency. And mind you, this is a generalization because we've got 50 states with their own ideas of how income tax law works, but it's a good rule of thumb. Some other things to consider, where's your primary residence located? Do you have other real estate in, say, California? Do you have a business in California? Or one that catches people is, do you have an out-of-state business, but all the customers are in California? Because that actually can generate California income. Where do you have your driver's license? What address is on your passport? Where's your car registered? And then some funny ones that are used in residency audits. California is very aggressive in this. And it's not intended to feed your fears on Big Brother's watching, but where's the predominance of your credit card transactions originating? Where do you go to church? Where do you get your pet groomed? Where's your main circle of friends? And even your call records. And so I'm not saying this is going to always come up, but in residency audits, these are the types of things that they look at to make a determination of how to tax your income. And so just to make you aware. But now let's say you do make a decision to leave California and the year of your residency change, and assuming you do all the right things and you make the clean cut from the state, you'll most likely do it mid-year. So you're going to have a part of your California return, and you're going to have a part of your return in your whatever your new home state is. And in general, if your new home state taxes your income, you're going to pay tax in that state. But if you also pay tax in California, for example, any taxes you pay to California will generally be a credit to your new home state. But the problem there is if the state, that has the highest tax rate is what you're ultimately going to pay. So that's going to only be on that source income to California. And I hope that makes sense. I'm going really fast here. But anyway, our tax code is pretty crazy, but it tries to be fair in some ways. And so if you go to the next slide, please. Another thing to keep in mind here is that selling property in California and leaving the state can sometimes lead to an inability to actually later return if you change your mind, because you can actually get priced out because California has some of the highest real estate prices relative to the rest of the country. So that's something you also want to consider. And then also things like cost of living, the local salaries, those are all factors you want to take into consideration. I covered a lot of ground here in a really short amount of time. So if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to myself or anyone here on the panel. We're happy to help you. And now I want to hand this off to Rick San Vicente, who's going to discuss some retirement financing options that you may not have considered or you may not even know exist. Thank you.
All right. Well, thank you, Chris. So Lisa did a great job of kind of explaining, from a realtor's perspective, some of the different places you can go move to and some of the more popular places that are there and how she can help you in those states. Martin will help you figure out, okay, how do I make my money last? What are some of the ways that I can, do the retirement plan that makes this thing, help me live as long as I want to. And Chris will make sure that wherever you live, you consider all the different tax ramifications and making sure that you actually divorce yourself from California properly so you don't get penalized. What I'm here to do is to help you look at some of the ways you can purchase that residence, because wherever you're going to go, you're going to need a residence. And if you're retiring and you're over 60, this product is one of the products that are available to you. So sometimes you're looking at, okay, how much money do I want to put down? What's my monthly mortgage payment going to be? Or if I don't want a monthly mortgage payment, do I have to pay all cash for it? And that takes a lot of cash out of the retirement plan. So therefore, you have less to live off of for the rest of your life. So there's all these trade-offs you got to think about. This product that I've got for you is HUD FHA derivative. It's a jumbo as well. And it's just another example of ways you might have a house that's maybe worth this much, but that's too expensive for you, especially if you want to have no monthly mortgage payments and you have to pay all cash. What if you could come in with only this much money and still not have a monthly mortgage payment? That's what this can do for you. So as an example, if you look at this little matrix here, most of us aren't going to go retire in a $2 million house. You might be in the $1 million range and you might be thinking of paying $1 million in cash. This is just an example. You could use $950 of that if you're 70 years old and get into a $2 million house. Now there's no more monthly mortgage payments. It's all cash flow to you. And that other $1 million stays in your retirement account. Let's just say you go up to the top of the matrix and you got a $1 million house and you're 62. So you're relatively young. You could put down in the 540s and you have no more monthly mortgage payment. So this is just an example of some of the things you can do. If we can go to the next slide, I'm going to show you an example since a lot of us are from the East Bay. And this is probably a little bit outdated because unfortunately this house that was probably 1.499 a couple of months ago is probably a little bit more expensive now. But if you had used this product a couple of months ago, you could have bought this $1.5 million house. If you're 70, probably or in the 770s was your down payment. If you're 62, your down payment was probably in the 870s. And if you're 80 and older, and in my world, it's good to be old. The older you are, the better benefit you get on this product. But what this does is it allows you to put down significantly less than all cash and end up with no monthly mortgage payment. And when you're 62 or older, cash flow is king. So I just wanted you to be aware of this product. We can help you, massage what works within your budget, what doesn't, what you're available to, what's not in any one of 48 states out of the 50 that are available. But what I'm going to introduce you to now is Daryl. He's an expert on the traditional mortgages where you make a monthly mortgage payment and some of the things that you might want to consider from there.
Great. Hey, thank you, Rick. So assuming that you've lived in your property for some time, there's two assumptions we can kind of make. One is that selling in California, most likely you're going to have a significant amount of proceeds from that sale. And if you're choosing to buy outside of California, there's a very good chance that the next home that you purchase will most likely be less than the home you currently own now. And with that happening, you have some very unique options available to you. Okay, as we've already alluded to before, you can certainly have the option of going ahead and just paying cash for a property. And however, with interest rates being as low as they are right now, maybe that's not perhaps the best choice, right? If interest rates are somewhere around 3% or less, and Martin can get you a significantly higher rate of return than that, that's probably more likely than maybe the better way to go. Of course, you're going to want to talk with Chris to discuss your tax benefits in order to make sure you're compensating for the for those additional higher proceeds. So in terms of national lending, our parent company is American Pacific Mortgage, and we lend in basically every state except the state of New York. And one of the things that I thought would be helpful would be looking at an example. Now, with Lisa providing such fantastic content on Nashville, Tennessee, I thought it would be maybe a useful practice to just take a look at an example for Nashville. And she had mentioned that the median sales price for Nashville was around $600,000. So in our example, we have a down payment of $300,000, and with a mortgage payment of a rate around 2.75%, you see the mortgage payment there of $1,224 a month. Of course, you get to choose whoever you want to use for homeowners insurance. So that's about $100 a month. Now, one of the things that Chris had mentioned is that with Tennessee being a no state tax state, that the property taxes are in fact higher. And so for Nashville, that tax rate is around 2.7%. So as you can see in this example, that $1,337 a month payment in taxes is actually obviously higher than the current mortgage payment. But even still, you're looking at a payment of about $2,700. Now, one other thing that might be of interest is if we look at another example, and this is another one that Lisa had mentioned for Naples, pardon me. So on $1 million sales price with the same down payment of $300,000, your same interest rate, your mortgage payment is about $2,857. We up the insurance a little bit. Now with Naples, the property taxes, one of the things with taxes is, we can look at the tax rates as a whole for a state, but just like here, even in the Bay Area, as we all know, that the property taxes can vary significantly even from city to city. And with Naples, the property taxes are actually kind of more similar to us, around a 1.25%. So in this example, the taxes are about $1,041 and the payment is a little over $4,000. So we're looking at about a $1,300 difference for you basically having $400,000 more in sales price. And a lot of it has to do with the lower property taxes. And the other thing too is you're going to shorten that gap even more because of course the difference in payment is mortgage interest and property taxes, both of which are tax deductible and thus decreasing the impact of that higher payment. So at this point, I'm going to go ahead and turn it back over to Lisa, and thank you so much for the time.
That was awesome, you guys. So we know for everyone watching, we're giving you an overview of each subject. But we want you all to know that we want to be here to answer questions after the webinar. You are so welcome to reach out about your specifics. But let's open this up to some Q&A, Francesca. I know Francesca's going to share. We've got some people jumping on with questions.
Okay.
That way we can help to answer some of your concerns. And we so appreciate everyone joining us. We're excited to help you guys with anything that you need.
Okay, so Wanda's asking, how do interest rates and loan costs on reverse mortgages compare to traditional rates?
Okay, that's a good question. So they're going to be different because remember, on a traditional mortgage, you're required to make a monthly mortgage payment every single month. So it's a completely different product. With this product, you're not going to be making a monthly mortgage payments for 5, 10, 15, 20 years before the lender gets a penny from you, as long as you pay your property taxes on time and do the other basics that you're supposed to. So it's going to be very different from that standpoint. It is not really, shouldn't be comparable, but you got variables in the 2s all the way up to fix, probably the highest one I think right now is 699 or something like that. So you'll be provided with all kinds of choices so that you can take a look at them and see what it is. Some have higher fees, some have very lower fees. So it really is like anything. Like if you're looking at what state you're going to go to, everything's a little bit different. So we'll get into the customized opportunities for you as you get there, and then you'll see all the required disclosures and all the options. I like sharing the options with you because I think it's important for you to know them all. So I hope that answers the question.
Doesn't the interest rate vary quite a bit with you also based on their credit, like their credit scores? So if they have super good credit, don't they get a lower rate generally?
Not as much because our bar for credit is significantly different. Okay. We're not looking for them to be able to have a DTI ratio so that they can make their payment. We're more looking for, are you going to be able to handle your monthly mortgage, your monthly cash, and pay your property taxes so you don't get into trouble. Right. So it's actually simpler to qualify for.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so Leo is asking, do you think it's possible for us to do a contingency, meaning we go to another state we want to move to and write an offer that is contingent on selling our home? We're afraid our home, it will sell too quickly and we won't have anywhere to go.
Boy, that's probably for me. That's a very good question. I think everyone asked that same question. So what I would share with people is, most of the states across the country have seen active markets like we have. So like, if you were to ask me that question, could I stay in the East Bay and write a contingent offer subject to my house selling? The answer would generally be no, because there's too much demand for housing, and a seller isn't going to wait for you to sell your home when they have other people lined up that are prepared, right? So what I would say to answer that question is, generally speaking, what we recommend is go to the states that you're considering moving, educate yourself, find out, really make sure you're comfortable with where you plan to go, have a professional in that marketplace ready to help you and keeping you informed. Come back here, sell your home with the understanding that your buyer has to wait, which they will. The demand is high enough. They will do what you want them to do and they'll wait. And then while they're waiting for you, you've got your buyer in place, then you go and find and secure a home with a non-contingent offer. That's the best route, because if you try to do it the other way, the seller at the state where you're moving, generally speaking, they're not going to do that. And then you're back to square one again. So that would be my advice, is you sell first, but there's ways to strategize so that you don't feel like you have to be homeless. That's a good question. Super good question.
Okay, so we have another question from Tracy. She is asking, if my home is held joint with right of survival and a trust, is there a full cost basis increase or only half if the spouse passes away?
Well, this is where I love my job. I feel like a politician because I have to always start everything with, well, in general, usually. So if, for example, if you're talking about being held in trust, if that's a living trust, meaning a revocable trust, in general, when one spouse dies, the full amount of the fair market value at the time of death would apply to getting that step up. So I hope that answers your question, Tracy.
You might want to tell them what a step up is, Chris. I think some people
Sure. So for example, you buy a house 50 years ago and pay $10,000 for it, and it's now worth $2 million or whatever. So for tax purposes, you paid $10,000, so you've got this huge gain. But if someone passes away, the people that would then inherit the property would get what's called a step up, and whatever the value is of that property at the time of their passing, the fair market value, that's now the new basis in that property. So if they were to sell it the next day, there would be no income tax because there's no gain or loss on the sale. And I hope that clarifies. And again, I'm just going to use it in general. That's the answer.
Talk to a professional about your specifics.
If I could just add to that, that was a great answer, Chris, but I'd just add to that the step up in basis is actually one of the things being debated now.
I didn't want to open that one up.
Some potential tax law changes coming down the road potentially later in the year. So just watch out for that.
Well, and the step up also holds true. If a spouse passes, you own it with your spouse, they pass, you're supposed to get a step up, which they're talking about. Right. That's on the potential cutting board as well.
Don't you get half, right? If
before
one spouse dies, you get at least a half step up.
Step
up on their half.
All the way.
Pull them out.
Yeah, pull the step up. But talk to before you make any, like they said, like we were talking earlier, before you do anything, make sure that you understand the current law, because we might see some change. Hopefully not.
And just to also add, if they have an irrevocable trust, that can be where there will not be a step up on their passing. That's a whole nother discussion. But so that's why when they say in trust, I don't know what type of trust they're talking about.
Good question.
Okay, so we have a question from Harminder. He's asking, do interest rates vary from state to state?
That's a good question. The short answer is no. And that primarily has to do with the fact that in terms of mortgage guidelines, everything is pretty much on a national basis, right? So if you're doing what we call a Fannie Mae loan, which here in the Bay Area, for the most part is $820,000, that loan amount actually varies throughout the country, with the lowest amount being around $548,000. So they've instituted those guidelines. So the interest rates are pretty much the same there. And then even in terms of what we call the jumbo loans, you see the Fannie Mae loan amounts, those are national as well. So the good news is that the rates are relatively constant throughout the country.
And I would say the same thing holds in our market as well.
Right.
It's pretty much a product. So the product is priced a certain way, and it doesn't matter which state you apply it to.
Yeah.
Okay, so Wanda Hexie has another question. She's asking, if someone sells their home in California and takes the proceeds to buy a home out of state, do they lose their property tax protection / benefits provided under Prop 19?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, Prop 19 is only in California.
Right.
Anywhere in California, yeah.
Yeah, sorry.
Like, I get that question a lot too.
Okay, and we actually have an anonymous attendee asking, my husband and I are planning on retiring in Hawaii soon, actually in Maui. Oahu is our second choice. anything they should know about Hawaii.
Expensive.
I have a realtor friend.
Beautiful.
Yeah, I have a realtor friend who works in that area. So I would say we can put them in touch with an expert there. I don't think that there's anything unusual at all about making that move. Nothing that you'd have to worry about, but check with someone there. I think that there's some COVID restrictions, but hopefully those will be gone soon.
It is a relatively high cost of living state.
Yeah,
for sure.
Okay, so we have another question. Amin from Danville is asking, I'm not comfortable investing a lot of my money into the stock market, especially when it is at an all-time high. Don't you think I should be considered about the risk of investing now?
I'll take that one. Yeah, well, it is, we are bumping into all-time stock market highs every once in a while here, every few weeks, but it is, it's been shown after study that it is impossible to time the market. You'll never get it right. The professional market traders never get it right. So it's not timing the market, it is time in the market that really leads to success. And when we talk about building these retirement portfolios, the stock market is only part of the portfolio in a diversified allocation. And if there is a concern about risks in the market, we can take care of those risks with things like building a guaranteed income component to the portfolio with income that is guaranteed not to last as long as you do. It does never run out. And we can also put in specialized buffers and floors on portfolios so that there's a lot of downside protection against market drawdowns. So there's ways that we can build in a lot of market volatility protection into portfolio.
Okay, Wanda actually has a follow-up question to her Prop 19 question. She wants to know, do they lose the Prop 19 benefits permanently if they choose to move back someday?
Ooh.
Well, I believe you get time. I'm not an expert on this and I'd have to pull up my notes, but I do believe you get time from when you sell the property to when you buy another property. But I can look that up and I can give you a specific answer.
Yeah, that's a good question, because when we used to have Prop 90 and Prop 60, which was allow people to move their tax base to a few counties or locally, when they added Prop 19, they said anywhere across the state, and you could do it up to 3 times. But that's a good question, Chris. You have to find out for us.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And then it looked like Cassandra has a question too on whether living in a state for 183 days. I don't want to take your thunder there, Francesca.
No, go right ahead. Go right ahead.
Well, Cassandra says here, she says, did I hear Chris say that if you reside in the state for 183 days, that is considered your primary state? And that, again, in general, yes, that is a good rule of thumb, that if you are in a state, not consecutively, but with 183 days in one tax year, that generally that becomes your home state for that tax year. If you're in another state, presumably, you would have more than likely either a part year resident or a non-resident return as well.
Well, and Chris, we've had clients. I have a client who's trying to do this now or proposing is, oh, hey, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to go buy a house in Nevada, and I'm just going to say that that's my primary. And then I'm going to do my taxes through Nevada, but they actually live here and work here. And I said, well, you better talk to a CPA. I have someone you need to talk to. So, if you can explain on that a little bit.
Sure.
I know you explained that earlier, but this is a myth that people don't understand.
Yeah, California caught on to that a long time ago. And so let's just say you have a business, it's in California, and you move to Nevada, and you think, cool, I've now, I'm avoiding California tax because I'm in Nevada, which has no income tax. Well, California would beg to differ because you have a business in the state generating income, therefore it's subject to California tax. Or if you have, a rental property is another one in California that would generate either California income or even a California loss. So that would not generate income tax if there's a loss. But California, they caught on to that little trick a long time ago. And that's why I mentioned things like where you get your dog groomed and all these other crazy things, because because people tried to do that. They move right to the border and think they've now, whoo, I'm out of California. Another thing that comes up a lot too is you know, you have a piece of real estate in California and you do what's called a 1031 exchange, where you do a tax deferred exchange where you can sell an investment property and you can then defer the gain into a new property and not pay tax at that time until you sell the new property, or you do another 1031 exchange and ad nauseum. But nonetheless, you know, people will sell a property in California as a 1031 exchange, buy another property in, say, Tennessee or Washington or wherever, and think, you know, I'm done with California, I'm out. Well, California also caught on to that. So there's a form you have to file every year, and you got to say, hey, this is the amount of California gain I am now deferring. And even if you don't have a filing requirement in California, you got to file that form with California every single year to tell them, hey, I'm still deferring this gain from you. And when you actually do sell that property, ultimately, let's say you buy one in Tennessee and then you sell it, now it's time to pay the tax. And California is going to say, okay, of that gain you incurred, here's the original California gain. Now you owe us, please write us a check. So those are all things and that's why I say it's a really complicated topic. I could just keep talking.
That's a serious clawback they're looking for on that one.
Hey, Chris, I have one more because this is new now because of what we've experienced this last year and a half. So if let's say a person works in the Silicon Valley, but their employer has now said you can work 100% from home. People think, okay, so then I'm actually going to take my primary and I'm going to move across the country to somewhere and just work online, and they earn an income from California. How do they handle that?
Well, so if you're an employee, what would happen is the company would actually give you whatever that state's wages. So you'd get a W-2 and it would say, you know, whatever that state is, and then you would file a tax return in that state. Another thing that companies are doing is they're saying, oh, great, you're moving from the Bay Area, which is a very high cost of living. There was a real poverty line study done, and they said a family of 4, the poverty line is around $110,000 a year. That's the true poverty line. So Bay Area is expensive. So you move somewhere where it's a lower cost of living. So companies are catching on to that and saying, okay, well, we're going to adjust your salary now, and we're going to pay you less because it costs less to live where you're at. So that's another thing you got to think about.
Yeah.
Okay, so we have a few more questions here. So Nicholas is asking, I have a revocable trust set up in California. If I move to Florida, what are the consequences, especially in terms of taxes?
This gets into an estate planning issue, but I would say you'd want to redo your trust and consult with an attorney in Florida and deal with your estate from a Florida perspective. I hope that answers your question.
Chris, wouldn't it?
Pretty uncommon though. Revocable trusts are pretty uncommon, right? Most of them are irrevocable.
No, most are revocable.
Revocable, yeah.
So it would be pretty much a income tax neutral move, I imagine, Chris, because it's basically a pass through.
Right.
So there may be some issues on the estate side, but you want to redo that trust.
Right. Did he say irrevocable or revocable?
Oh, sorry. Was I pronouncing it incorrectly? I'm sorry. It's revocable.
Okay.
Sorry.
Yeah. So it'd be like your living trust. And so to me that really kind of says, well, it's all of your assets. Another thing I didn't touch on today is things like your investment income. So. Oh
wait, I'm sorry. Nicholas, he actually said it's irrevocable. Sorry.
Okay.
Retyped it.
So that is a California trust, and especially if you have the trustees in California will definitely like to say, yep, you got California sourced income, but it depends on what's in there too, which is what I was just touching on here is, so if you have investment income, dividend income, stock sales, things like that, a way of thinking of it is the taxability of that is wherever your feet are located. So if your feet are standing in Florida, in general, that's going to be Florida income on things like interest and dividends. And again, it's in general. And that's.
I'll just add, if the beneficiaries are receiving income and the beneficiaries are located in California,
yep,
definitely they'll come after that.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Talk to a professional personally.
I feel like a broken record. Sorry.
Okay, so Cheryl is asking, do interest rates vary by state?
I think we got that one.
I think
Oh,
we
was that
covered
one?
that one. But
Sorry, I
no,
mean-
the short answer is no. Fortunately, they're stable throughout the country.
Okay. So an anonymous attendee is asking, they're planning on an additional dwelling unit, most likely a rental. Do you guys recommend they borrow money from the bank or spend their own money for construction, and they're asking for tax purposes? Do you want me to ask the question again?
Repeat that.
So they're planning on building an additional dwelling unit, most likely as a rental. Do you recommend they borrow the money from the bank or spend their own money for construction, and they're asking for tax purposes?
Oh, well, that's kind of a twofer, if you will. Or actually, I said most of everyone here, because there's the financial component to that of, well, if you're going to use your own money, that's going to come out of savings or wherever. So now you're not earning a rate of return on that. So that's a cost. If mortgage rates being the way they are so low, the thought there would be, well, I can keep that money earning a better rate of return than I am paying in interest. And so you have that arbitrage between your investment returns and the mortgage interest that you actually would get a deduction if it's being treated as a rental. So to me, I'm not saying go out and get debt, but I like debt when it's used properly.
Well, I'll just add to that, if you get a long-term fixed mortgage, it's sort of the only time in finance where inflation is your friend. Inflation is working for you. And if you think inflation is going to go up in the future, it's going to work even better for you, because think of it, if you get a 30-year loan, you're paying back with less and less valuable dollars each and every year that goes into the future.
Right.
So it can, and as Chris mentioned, you have all the opportunity cost of not getting any return on those monies that you use to fund it yourself. So why not use the other people's money and get the advantage of kind of the arbitrage between what you can gain in terms of return and inflation working for you.
Yeah, that makes sense. And ADUs right now are a big consideration. The counties have gotten so much more easy, like the restrictions on requirements to build them has become easier. Getting the permits to build them has become easier because they're encouraging the extra dwellings. They're encouraging more housing. So yeah, they're easier.
I think there was a question in there for Daryl about PACE loans.
Thank you, Rick. I did notice that. So in regards to PACE loans, what's unique about those is that generally speaking, those are financed primarily by increasing your property taxes. And the one thing that, whether it's, if it's solar or whatever the case may be, I don't know if they necessarily go into the great detail with respect to how those are repaid. And sometimes people are surprised to learn that when they get a new mortgage, because it is in fact tied to property taxes and such, it does have to be paid. And in fact, I've got a gentleman right now that we're doing his loan, and lo and behold, fortunately, he's got a lot of equity, but he has to pay off that PACE loan as part of the refinance. So it's an important consideration to consider when you elect to get a PACE loan.
Okay, so Chris, there's another tax question for you. If
Oh,
if someone has a CalPERS pension, do they face more scrutiny when they move out of state from the franchise tax board?
I think so.
I wouldn't say more scrutiny. No. I don't know if you have anything to add to that, Martin, but
No, I don't think so. It would just be like any other pension
right. You earned it.
provider, private or public, would be the same treatment.
Yep. Exactly. I mean, California would love to tax it if you do truly cut ties.
Yeah.
Okay, so we have another question. How many days in a 1031 exchange do you have to identify another property?
You have 45 days, and that's no ifs, ands, or buts, period. There's no in general on that one.
And I've had people say, can't we get an exclusion? Can't we ask for extra time?
I'll just add one thing to that. It is the industry, the investment industry in recent years have come up with a product called a Delaware Statutory Trust
Yeah.
version of a 1031 exchange. They're actually very scalable programs. You can basically do any amount. And if you are doing a 1031 exchange, you've identified a property and that property falls through, you can have a backup identification to a DST program.
Yep.
Or you can have, if the properties don't match up exactly in terms of values, you have a taxable boot, you can use the DST program to scoop up that and not have a taxable event.
It's true, Martin, because I always tell everyone, we do a lot of 1031 exchange. We have a lot of investor clients, and I tell all of them, while you're planning your 1031, make sure that they talk to Martin, because understand what the Delaware Statutory Trust is before you go into this, because you may opt that would be a great alternative to your original plan. You know, like they think, I want to buy a commercial building, I want to buy a whatever, triplex, whatever they want to do, move it into a different state. But always have that as a backup just in case, for sure. Yep.
I also recommend it for folks if they like real estate, but they hate it.
Yeah.
So they don't like getting the phone calls. They don't want to deal with a property manager, but they like the fact that real estate, you know, in general goes up. So a Delaware Statutory Trust, what's great about it is you can sell your rental property. You can then park the funds into this Delaware Statutory Trust. That trust will then take that fund, those funds, and they will then invest in real estate that you don't have to even deal with. And you then get a check, you know, as a rate of return. So it's a nice alternative.
Yeah, and the returns have been pretty good. What I understand, Martin, and you can explain it better, is the companies that work at the DST, they look at newer buildings in areas that are high rent, there's high demand. So they do tend to capture a good return at the time when they sell them also, but there's a good return on that monthly. You know, it sounds like
the returns are very attractive. And they're usually going into very desirable properties. Most of these are you know, Class A residential in growing areas. Some of them are medical office buildings that are very profitable and, you know, cash flow very well. So yeah, it can be a very good investment. The other thing that I like about them is, as opposed to putting everything into like one geographic area, if you do a 1031 exchange, you know, we have a lot of fires and earthquakes here in California. You could actually, in the DST program, actually be invested in a portfolio. You could have properties in multiple states. In one 1031 DST program. So you have that diversification of a portfolio of properties as opposed to one property.
Right.
Flexibility. Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So Dennis is asking, if I know my purchase price, can you tell me how much down payment I would need to still not have a monthly mortgage payment?
Yes. In the short run. I mean,
Good
you have to
answer.
take it. I need to get some more information from you, you know, because a lot of it's like age based. What's the age of both of you? The youngest one is what it's usually based on, the purchase price, and which program you pick. But yes, we can definitely do that. And then you can have an idea of what you can go shopping for. And just like in the traditional world, like with Daryl, we do full pre-approvals as well. So that way your realtor is going to be happy that they know you can for sure close.
We love that when we know that they can for surely close, and
Yeah.
it's easy for them. That makes us happy. Oh, for sure.
And if I could just real quick, jumping back to the 1031 exchange, because I'm a worrywart and I want to be able to sleep well tonight. So you've got the 45 days to identify a property. There's also the 180-day rule where the deal has to be done, closed, signed, sealed, delivered. The other thing is generally 1031 exchanges will span years, tax years. So you start it in one tax year and you end it in the next. One thing you really, really need to be aware of is you must file your tax return after the deal closes, because you can bust up a 1031 exchange that way.
Yeah. And also, I've had a client who called me the day his house recorded. Oh, my house just recorded. I haven't touched the money yet, but the house recorded. Can you set me up on a 1031 exchange? And I was like, oh my God, the money was already in they hadn't touched it, but you got to do this before you close. You got to.
Exactly.
You don't the day. Yeah.
The other point I was going to make is if you're going to do a 1031 exchange, you have to use a 1031 exchange facilitator. You can't just say, oh, I'm doing a 1031 exchange. You absolutely have to engage someone that will handle the transaction for you. And so just be aware of that.
Yep.
Okay, we actually have another 1031 exchange question. Can I eliminate California income tax if I do a 1031 exchange on the sale of my California rental property and change my residency to another state?
Well, I mentioned that a little bit ago. No. And that's what I was talking about, where you would then have, there's a form you have to file with California, and you would tell California, here's the gain I'm deferring, and I'm moving over to whatever state, Tennessee or whatever. And you have to file that form with California every year. You still own that property until you sell it. And then that's going to be the trigger for California to know it's time to come and collect. So if you want to get geeky, it's form 3840 is the form. And even if you don't have to file a tax return in California, you completely left the state. You have nothing here. Every year you got to send them that form. It's pretty wild.
Yeah.
There is one way out of the tax, and that is death. You know, if we still have a step up in basis.
I mean, that's a great way to do it. Absolutely.
So.
Yeah.
Okay, we have another question. When we sell a personal house, how long do we have before we have to repurchase again, even if it's in another state?
So that I can answer that one. So I get that one a lot, actually. So back in the day, and Chris, you could tell us how many years ago it was, maybe 10 or 15. Remember back in the day when you sold your primary, within 2 years, you had to buy another primary, right? Well, in today's world, you're not required to buy another primary ever, Francesca. So if the person sells the house every 2 years, they can sell their home as their primary residence, at least in California, and not pay gain on a certain percent, whether they're married or they're single. But you're not required to go buy another home, even if you move out of state. If that answers. Chris, you could maybe clarify that a little bit.
I feel like I'm taking all the time up, so please keep going.
A lot of people have tax questions.
I just had this question.
Come on down, do some tax returns with me.
Yeah.
Okay, do property taxes vary significantly from state to state?
Yes,
And county to county, county to county.
absolutely.
And again, as I mentioned earlier, it does, it's like I said, even here in the Bay Area, if you're buying in, San Ramon versus buying in, Berkeley or Oakland, you're always subject to those specific taxes.
Yep.
But generally speaking, as Chris shared, those states without a state income tax, most likely you're going to be paying higher property taxes.
Yeah.
Well, and just like the example that you gave earlier, Daryl, well, I ran the property taxes on the little town of Lebanon, which
Right.
is 30 minutes outside of Nashville. It's 0.84% tax.
Right.
And inside the city of Nashville, it was like 2.5%, right? Something like that.
Exactly. Yeah, it's all over the place.
Yeah, dramatically higher in the city there, just like here. I guess you'd say the same thing. Get closer. Yeah. So.
Yeah, and just because I'm a Debbie Downer, but there's a thing called use tax that a lot of people aren't aware of, and states are, particularly California, are really trying to hammer home. So for example, if you go into a state that has no sales tax and you buy things in that state and you come back to your home state that does have sales tax, you're supposed to pay use tax. Most people don't, but again, just making you aware. So the states are catching on all to these little games that people do.
I've heard of one state that has a thing called personal property tax. So
Yeah.
crazy.
Don't be
Just
telling on
crazy.
your neighbor that goes to Oregon or Washington to buy a car and comes back here,
Yeah.
There you go.
Amazon was a big one. They got beat up on by the state of California because they had an unfair advantage. They were able to sell products to folks, for 8, 9, 10% less because they weren't charging sales tax.
Yeah.
And which isn't fair.
Exactly. Yeah,
Okay,
good.
so
How are we doing with questions, Francesca?
so that seems to be the last one. Should we maybe just wait a couple more minutes to see if
Yeah, well,
Anyone
what
has
we'll
any
tell
more?
everyone too is we are going to this recording is going to be live. So if anyone has questions after, they can always go back to the recording on the live, pages and ask another question, or of course contact any of us, and we're so happy to help you. Even if you ask one of us a question that we are not the expert of, we can guide you to the one who can help best to answer your question. So reach out to any of us. We're here to help. Yeah, and we so appreciate you all joining us. This is super fun. We're delighted to help. This is a webinar that we like to do in person when we can, but COVID has changed things up a bit. So doing it you know, on a webinar basis is, you know, it's what it is. So, but call us if you have any questions, you guys. Thanks again for joining. We so appreciate your time.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
And we'll
Thanks,
put
everyone.
Bye, everybody.
And for
Take care.
Jessica, go ahead and put our contact on the screen if you would, and that way anyone can jot down the information.
Okay, so I'm gonna put it up really quick.
Sorry, Rick, you were going to say something. Rick had a.
I'm just saying goodbye.
Okay, so I'm gonna put everyone's information up for a few minutes.
Okay.
Let me actually.
Thanks for joining, everyone. Stay well.
Should we be playing music here? Some kind of.
I know, Daryl, you could sing a little for us.
And then Francesca,
You don't want
it was Wanda. Wanda had that Prop 19 question. So I hope you have her contact info.
I should be able to.
Okay, cool.
I think when they registered, they provided the email, so I can definitely get you her information because it seemed like she had a lot of questions. So
Sure.
yeah.
Wanda's my client, so I have her info.
Oh, well, there you go.
We are also going to send out the playback to everyone who participated so that just in case you want to go back and watch and or you have our contact, that we'll have it. So, all right, guys, have a good night. Thanks for
All
joining.
right, everybody.
Good night. Take care.
Bye.
Bye.
Take care.